Hey, I'm Sarah Smith, family doctor, clinical day advisor, and the chatting coach. Welcome back to Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast, where we're going to be interviewing peers or world experts who can help us think about our clinical day in a way that is more sustainable and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have with us Dr. Dhaval Desai. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you
Welcome.
for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I am in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a physician. I am trained in internal medicine and pediatrics, and I am an active father, husband, two little ones, 10-year-old girl and 5.5-year-old little boy.
Love it. Okay. What about your journey through medicine? Tell us about where you started and some of the challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanted to be a doctor, but I found myself in college not necessarily fitting in with that classic pre-med crowd that was very type A, gung-ho, always, gunning for the A, in organic chemistry and all. I just didn't. And I wasn't disillusioned by that, but I realized the liberal arts were also very powerful, and that background in education can be really important. And it served me well. I was economics and Spanish is what I studied in college with the pre-med requirements, and I taught high school Spanish briefly before going on to medical school, which was an amazing experience. And I think ultimately today made me a better doctor. But I went abroad for medical school, American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine. And I always like to think I was an underdog when pre-med and all of that. I just was, in the middle. And it was hard to get into a US program at the time. So I was looking at my options instead of taking multiple gap years. And the program there that I got into was very impressive to me, and it was the right fit. And I went down there, and fast forward 2 years on the island, followed by 2 years in New York City, rotating through some very inner city indigent hospitals in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. I decided med-peds, or internal medicine and pediatrics, was going to be my option for career, and that's what I was super excited about. And I ultimately matched at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio in med-peds, and I did 4 years of residency there and then was off to be an attending. And, I really flourished. I would say, we have to know what our strengths are, right? All of us do. And it's important to know that the clinical areas is where I really focus, the human side, the connection at the bedside, the team approach. Those were always my forte and strength, which I think helped me ultimately kind of carve out confidence in what direction I wanted to go in. And I became a hospitalist. And that's where I started in 2012. So when I think back on that, that's what I always wanted to do. And with that, I wanted to be a leader. I said, well, the daily clinical work, I want that, but I also enjoy growing. I want to be more than a doctor, right? That passion came out saying there's a lot more to do. So I joined Emory Healthcare at one of Emory Healthcare's community hospitals, Emory St. Joseph's Hospital. I came back to Atlanta. A year later, I got married. My wife, also a physician, we're a two-physician household, started her career in physical medicine and rehab here and, started putting some roots down. And then my career just picked up. It was one of those things in medicine, the more you say yes to and you become good at, or even mediocrely good at administratively, the more the system likes to pile on you. And initially, I was probably naive in hindsight saying, yes, 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 I'll do this, because guess what? I wanted to grow, right? That's what I wanted to do. And that was my way to do it. And I became the director of our group just 3 years into my trajectory and did that for 10 years.
So what does a director look like? So what would a
Yeah, good question. And that's where it gets like, I think we'll have a lot more meat to talk about on it because the director runs the group of hospitalists, inpatient internists, or family medicine doctors, 30 physicians, and 50% of my time is spent clinically. So, 8 to 9, maybe 10 clinical shifts a month. But the other part is all administrative, running the group, sort of a middle management approach in a big system, tons of meetings, metrics, tons of things to align, innovations, running 24/7 operations, all the challenges, clinical quality, you name it. And again, when you become director and you're a physician, it was a learning curve for me because again, I fell into the initial say yes, say yes, say yes, right? And I rapidly once again realized that the system, the more you say yes to, the more they're going to expect you to do. And frankly, try to line up your group of doctors and make them line up and do something the system and the metrics want. And I saw that. So I learned my way through that of navigating and advocacy. But guess what? The best thing about that job was really the connection I built with my doctors that were with me. And we were ultimately, I always said, look, I'm still one of you. I stayed in the trenches. I worked late shifts, night shifts, weekends. I did it all because I would never want to forget what it was like, but I still had to run the group. But the stuff I was privy to know about these physicians' personal lives through the good, the bad, ugly, death, new life, tragedy, all of it, it was a very privileged position. And that personal connection, when days I was frustrated administratively, that personal connection is really what kept me going, saying, I feel I'm needed. These people, these colleagues and friends need me. And they did. And I think I needed them because at reciprocity, I felt valued. So in 2020, COVID hit, as we all know, and that was a point where I could not leave my group. I would not. And initially, the adrenaline was so strong, saying, look, we're heroes. We're heroes in healthcare. People are watching us. The whole city's rooting for us. People are dropping off meals. We are on the front lines doing this. And it was the first time that it felt like hospitalists were really getting so much credit, for lack of better words, for the work they do in the hospital. And it felt good. 8 months in, the adrenaline waned, and I realized I was bottoming out because on the personal front, my son was born 2 weeks before the country shut down. And my wife, also a physician, was maternity leave turned into caring for a 4-year-old and a newborn. I was lurched back into the hospital, coming home, being at the hospital. I didn't know where I wanted to be, when I wanted to be, and being present at each place became increasingly difficult, to the point where I felt I was breaking and I really needed to do something about my mental health. And I did. I saw a physician. We talked about my sleep issues, the mood issues. And, to fast forward a little bit, I started medication. I saw a therapist. And, fast forward 4 years now, I'm much better. But that, in hindsight, was a climactic point, knowing that if I knew at that point something was going to have to change. I really did. But I was also scared to make a change at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure other physicians feel that, right? Like, we're scared because when you're part of this big system, you kind of fall into a rat race as a doctor, saying, well, I'm a leader now, I'm a clinician, I'm gaining a reputation, I do good work, I have a high standard, and I'm going to keep growing and growing up this healthcare corporate ladder. And truth be told, that's what I wanted to do. And then I developed my passion with obviously burnout, mental health, and really honing on that, writing my own memoir, Burning Out on the COVID Front Lines, aligning with the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation here in the US, which is the foundation dedicated to mitigating burnout and mental health for healthcare workers and destigmatizing it, that all my proceeds go back to them, because I felt so passionately about it after hearing about the death of Dr. Breen, who passed from suicide. By the way, in the US, if you didn't know this, 400 physicians a year die by suicide. That's more than one a day. And when I read about Dr. Breen in the summer of 2020, every paragraph gave me a visceral response saying, this could be me, this could be any one of my colleagues. So I really align with their mission. I'm an ambassador, all to say that I wanted to grow on the leadership of physician wellness. And I wanted to do that. And I was finding ways to do that in the system. And I was sort of developing that brand, so to speak, personally. And I said to myself, well, this is work that's not being done in my system well, to be honest. And there's opportunity. And they formed this whole wellness council and groups and divisions, whatever you want to call it, corporate structures. And about a year and a half ago, that was a pivotal point, and I'll share openly in open book, there was a position for the Chief Wellbeing Officer position, which will lead the system's well-being efforts, from physicians to all healthcare workers. And I said, this is the perfect time as a physician to jump into something more and do my passion and come out of this middle management grind leadership role and do something else and use my skills. And I applied for it. And truth be told, I was rejected after one 30-minute rather transactional interview. And that was such a slap in the face for me, not only for my personal ego, but the idea that, okay, they ended up bringing a non-physician in for the role, which I didn't necessarily agree with. I gave it a chance, but I really realized right then that something will change. I lost my dad that year also. And I thought to myself, well, I lost my dad, time to change a career. Maybe I can get the chief well-being officer job, and that'll be sort of my redefining moment in this big system. That didn't work out. And I felt disillusioned. I felt lost. I felt I'm not as good here as they think I am, or I think I am. They say I'm
Mhm.
good, but maybe they're pigeonholing me in the corner just to be in this position and keep bringing in whoever they want for other things. And that really didn't feel good to me. I felt like it wasn't serving me anymore. Does that sound familiar? Like, do you see, have you heard that theme before? It just doesn't, it wasn't serving me anymore. And every day when I was clinical seeing patients, it was fine, right? I had to like kind of pump myself up. It's all about patients. Then I get there, start seeing patients rounding in the hospital as a hospitalist. I'm all in, connecting, not a problem. But then everything administratively and the politics and the personalities and all of that just said, this is not going well. So I saw an executive coach, and I never thought this is outside of a mental health therapist. This was an executive coach. And I really didn't know what that meant before seeing it, right? And this is a non-clinician, non-physician, somebody who has healthcare experience, but I met with her formally. I talked to her briefly when I had this whole chief well-being officer thing because she was kind of a friend, and she said, maybe you should come see me formally. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should. So last January, I did that and I paid, and it was well worth it. And she said to me at that, I said, when we were planning planning, like, something's not right. I just need to do something else. And I said, but my people, my name's on a plaque in the hospital because I got this Physician of the Year award that normally people in their 60s get, but I got in my 40s. Like, my name's here and people depend on me. And she looked at me and said, Dr. Desai, let me tell you something. Nobody is going to give a shit if you leave tomorrow. And I said, no, that's not true. And she said it again, nobody will care. And fast forward, when I put my resignation in, guess what? Nobody cared. There was not this, what can we do to keep you? There was more the, sometimes you just got to go on. And I gave enough transition time and enough time to transition out and find a replacement and all that stuff. But it was true. I was moving on and they were too. And we can talk more about what I'm doing and how I decided to do that and why it's so important. But it was very important to hear that because what she described to me is that my loyalty was holding me back. And I think more physicians I talk to, the more I see the loyalty. And it's not necessarily loyalty to the system. We feel this loyalty to all of the patients we're serving. So we have to accept these conditions or these political situations or these career dissatisfaction moments because we're loyal. We are trained to be loyal and we're trained to not quit, right? We're trained to not feel defeated. That's how we are. We're supposed to be in this to go, march forward. And we have to realize that's not the reality. And I see it loud and clear now, loud and clear, which I did not see. You asked me this 2 years ago, January 24. If you asked me right now, we would be having this conversation. I would say, no, no, I would not. So that's sort of where it's sort of how all that transition happened. And it's all risky, but it was an important risk and realization.
Mm-hmm. So I acknowledge that kind of, I'm not going to say trapped feeling, but that loyalty trap, like you said, patients, my physicians that I was in charge of or looking after or part of their structure, organizational structure, and loyalty perhaps to some of that institution. And then the recognition that you are replaceable. So that's a lesson to learn, and it's a lesson to learn that once you've learned it, you're right. It's completely mind blowing.
Mind blowing because I had heard the you're replaceable before, and I frankly have used it, but I never really accepted it for me, which says maybe I had an ego in the job. I admit I own it. Like, I was good at what I was doing, and I'm like, well, no, they
Good
need
at what
me.
you're doing is part of your identity too.
It is because it
And
feels good to be good at what we're doing, doesn't
that's
it?
right. And very unsettling when you decide you're not doing it that way anymore, whether it be because you've chosen to, or whether it be because an institution's dropped you and it feels very unpleasant at that moment. But as you walk away from that, it's unsettling. And then perhaps on the other side of that, you realize, oh, there's more of life available.
Oh
There's
my gosh, there's
infinite
so much more
possibilities.
life. There's so much more life. Look, I like being out here talking to you. I like going on podcasts. I like going on media talking about the flu and what we can do. And I had media opportunities that came up with COVID, but it was very layered, and I had to get permission every time I would say something. And I'll share with you another political tipping point for me last year, and this is important for us physicians, is that these systems, they want to own you in sense of branding. And the minute you deviate something or maybe say something which ties somehow directly affiliates you with the institution or indirectly, it's sort of a blacklist for you. And let me explain. So, without getting political, the political situation we have in the United States is a lot of turmoil. ICE raids are a problem. Last January, when they all started, there was a law that was revoked saying ICE raids, there was a law initially saying ICE raids could not go to hospitals, schools, and churches, or something like that, the three areas. And that law was revoked by the president. And the raids were starting, and I wanted to know from my system, what is our plan when they come? Because they're going to
Mm,
come. And it was silent, and I asked for a plan, and I was pushing. I was pushing intentionally because I don't think there was a plan, and I wanted one. And my people were asking me, what are we going to do? Other hospitals around the area had put out plans saying, call this emergency number, close your charts, don't talk to anybody. Like, that's what I want to hear. I'm not saying go fight
mhm.
them, but I just want to know what you want us to do and protect me. And they said, no, there's no plan. There's nothing formal will be discussed. Call security. And I was not satisfied with that. So I wrote an op-ed in the local newspaper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is the Metro Atlanta newspaper, well read, that why ICE rates should stay out of healthcare. I did not name my institution. I did not throw them under the bus, but I openly stated my opinion about humanity and all the things a physician would argue about, or a nurse, anybody in healthcare reasonably would argue why our healthcare facilities need to be safe from this. And in the bio, so it went online on a Thursday, and it was going to go in the print paper on the big Sunday edition. So it went online Thursday at 12 o'clock. Within 90 minutes, I was called into one of the hospital leaders, president's office, to talk about it. And they said, you can't write this with Emory's name on it. I said, well, Emory's name's not on it. And like, actually, in the bio, the newspaper said you work for Emory Healthcare or Emory St. Whatever. Anyways. And I said, okay, well, I have done opinion pieces in the newspaper before on burnout, mental health, and they've used my name. And they've said I work where I work. And she said, no, well, they shouldn't have. And I said, okay, easy enough. I will call the newspaper, and before the print version comes out, the employer will not be on that. And I was going to, walk out. And we had a very, this is a person who's still a friend and with all things being considered. And I said, this is not going to change. And this is very frustrating to me that this front line feels that, we don't feel like we're getting what we need. And they were sharing that, nothing else will be said about this. And I realize more and more that, there's institutional pressure, whether you work in healthcare, education, whatever, corporate America, that you can probably not say certain things that you want to necessarily, even if you think it's freedom of speech, because of your position within an organization and what you do. And that's disturbing to me. And that was also a point when I walked out of that meeting saying, okay, it's really done now. Like, I'm not going to lose my integrity over something. I can argue for humanity, am I not? So that's part of our identity too, is that we should always feel safe to argue and advocate for what we believe in as physicians and what we're trained in, and first do no harm, focus on humanity, right? Because that's what we want to do. But many times we're forced to lose our integrity or lose our integrity without even knowing it in these situations. And I didn't want to become that person.
Yeah.
I sort of compare it to, the whole Prince Harry, Meghan saga and how they talked about their drama and conflicts and how it's not necessarily the Queen's fault, it's the firm's fault. So all these institutions are like the firm where there's a certain things you cannot say. And it's not the people and the leader's fault, it's the firm's fault. And that's just the way it is. And I decided, it served me and it was not going to serve me anymore. And it was my time to pivot.
Mm, got it. Okay. Tell us where you pivoted to. What did that look like?
Yeah. So I decided I wanted to do direct primary care, or DPC. Direct primary care is similar to the model of concierge medicine, where you actually, patients pay a certain fee to be with you. You get decreased number of patients in your patient panel, so you have more time with them, between 30 minutes to 45 minutes for follow-up visits, 60 minutes for new patients and physicals. It's really a model that allows you to be a physician the way you want to be a physician. I Traditionally in the model, I would document for 6 hours a day sometimes, because I had to do certain documentation based on what the insurance companies want and act like a cash register for the insurance company so I can bill higher complexity and all of that. And I got sick of all that, disillusioned. I'm like, this is meaningless to the patient. So DPC allows, since you don't bill insurance in DPC, I opt out of Medicare. I don't bill insurance. It's a flat fee for the patient to see me yearly, and that's what they pay me. Unlimited visits, and we have contracts with labs and all to run labs, and it's a well-oiled machine. But you can still have insurance, which we recommend. So if you get hospitalized, you need surgery, you need an MRI, your insurance can chime in. The way I pivoted out, I was going to start my own practice, sort of a micro practice, sublease some space out of another physician's office, a specialist office, and create this DPC, direct primary care practice, on my own and slowly build. However, as the forces aligned, the stars aligned, there was a retiring physician in this model who I've on and off spoken with for years. And through the grapevine, I heard that he was retiring or thinking about it. And I called him and his partner and met with him. And one thing led to the next. So I ended up purchasing his practice, and became, so I acquired some patients through that, and that now get to build it on my own. The advantage of that was it was already established infrastructure, so to speak, in this small practice that was already working. So I don't have to rebuild that. You can argue the cons are that I did have to take a loan out to, business purchase a new business and all of that, but that there'll be a return on investment for that. And I get to stay in my area, my geographic area. I get to work in the same community I was in. I did have a non-compete technically as a hospitalist, which you should never have as a hospitalist because we don't technically steal patients. And I have so many strong opinions on restrictive covenants in physicians, but I was able to very friendly, reasonably get out of that. I was supported by my division and the system, frankly, to do that because it's not been enforced for hospitalists. And, there's all these conversations, is it even enforceable? So all that to say is we should not be intimidated by that. And oftentimes physicians are intimidated because there's the 2-year waiting to do things. And sometimes, believe it or not, 2 years is not as long as of a time as you think it is to do something if it really means pivoting out, right? So that's what I'm doing now. I am now, how many months? 4 months in. I have not looked back one day. I am still working very hard, but I don't mind working. And I think that's what we have to remember as physicians, that we have a work ethic, right? The majority of us, and we don't mind working, but are we doing the work that makes us feel fulfilled enough, right? And are we feeling less stressed, less challenged in terms of the bureaucracy by the work we're doing? And that's what we need to strive for. For me, in this transition, I knew I still wanted to be clinical and see patients. I just had to let go of the ego that I'm not going to climb up the corporate healthcare ladder. I'm leaving all that behind. But now that I'm sort of free, for lack of better words, I can, pursue my passions, which are still the advocacy, the media outreach, podcasting, writing, advising tech startups, like all this fun stuff. There's so much out there. Does it mean that you're lucrative right away? Not necessarily, but it's so fulfilling so far. And I don't think there'll be any turning back.
Perfect. How do you prevent burnout in your new environment?
Um, you know, in terms of preventing burnout, I have control over my schedule. I have control over the number of patients I'm seeing. I am doing things on my own name. So the work I'm doing, I'm seeing the benefit back directly to me without a middleman managing me.
Mm-hmm.
I get to choose the staff that I'm working with and develop close relationships with them instead of being assigned to work with somebody. And I'm spending weekends with my family. Yeah, I answer phone calls and all that, but I don't mind doing that. Like I'm on my phone anyway. That's not a problem. I'm not working late hours anymore. I'm not getting home at 1:30 and waking up at 1:30 in the morning and waking up at 6 a.m. That is really problematic, that really can take a toll on your sleep cycle and life and mental health. And yes, we need people to do that, but I did that for almost 15 years and it's my time to do something else. And that's okay. We have to tell ourselves that's okay. And I know now that I'm on the other side, that's okay. So that's the things I'm doing right now. And I still
Mhm.
see a therapist and I'm still on medication for whatever I need to handle, and that's okay too. So that's what I'm doing now to help prevent my own burnout. But I don't feel that. I don't feel that dread of going to work.
No, that's excellent. I just being curious again with direct primary care, how do you go hiking in the Himalayas for a month? What would that look like in
Very
direct
good
primary
question.
care?
Very. So actually, I did 13 days in India over the holidays. I have another physician in the practice. She's her own operator, her own business, and I am too. She was around for emergencies if somebody needed to be seen. But
Mhm.
I would check in daily, mostly daily, with my team at the right hour, text me what's going on, anything pending, anything major, delegate appropriately to the nursing staff and the practice manager of things they can help me take care of, from medication refills to this. And also proactively communicate with your patients, letting them know, hey, I'm going to be off the radar just a bit. I'll still be connected. Here's the plan, and openly say that. So there are certainly still ways to do that. If you're the type of physician that says, when I go home, I don't want to be contacted by anybody, then this probably is not the model for you. Actually, it's not. But if you're the type that once you like relationships and you know somebody so well, that you're fine doing it, then it's really is for you. And you'd be surprised. People are like, well, aren't you on the phone all the time? And the answer is no, I'm really not. And when I am, it's somebody or a situation I know that I can take care of like that. So, and you have to remember, traditional primary care physicians can see, 2,000 patients in their panel. A
Mhm.
DPC physician can see 300 to 400. That's probably a target number total in their panel. So it's a
Mhm.
much more controlled situation.
Is there any organizations right now that you are aware of, or DPCs coming together to say, here's a on-call option for you guys that can handle your calls, or here's an option for
I
filling?
don't know. Yeah, good question. No, I don't think that's out there necessarily, but there are other physicians in the community that are doing similar models where it's very easy to develop relationships if that's needed. So we have to remember that. I don't know how else to say this, but to say when you're not tethered to this big system with layers and layers of bureaucracy, it's much easier to figure out a system to get things done in
Mhm.
the system that works. So there's ways to create within the city, there's DPC alliances, and there's ways to find people and your trustworthy people to help you with that. And then you compensate them and pay them whatever it is, you want to, how you figure that out. But it's everything is doable. Let's put it that way. Everything is doable.
I like that. Everything is doable. That's a good motto to have.
It's true. It's true.
I want to go back to you being a leader in the hospital. What sort of things did you have to look out for as you ch chose to move into leadership? What sort of training or places did you go to get education on how to be a leader and
Good
step into?
question. Yeah, so I was a hospitalist. There was leadership academies through Society of Hospital Medicine and ACP. Also reading good leadership books from leaders in non-healthcare worlds that are out there in sort of coaching and leadership. Very, very cool listening to those, or sorry, reading those and listening to some TED Talks. That's where I felt like I learned the most, is like learning from others. And then leadership training is also very important, conflict management, conflict resolution, communication. Those are the pillars of it. And that was a developed first 2 years, 3 years. I did a lot of those sort of academies and courses and seminars, so to speak. And then also on the job, who can you model your leadership after? You got to think back, who's the good leader, and think of that as like, how do you want to model that? And what type of leader do you want to be? Or a better way to think about it is, who do you not want to model it after? And don't do that. And then you're probably going to be a lot better at your job. And I think, as I tell anybody coming into that role, and my successor also, it'll take you 6 to 9 months before you feel really comfortable in this role. And it does. But the other things to watch out for are that the system, even when you're employed by the same system, it won't take care of you and it won't take care of the group you lead. So the amount you still have to advocate for your people in the same system, no matter where you work, is monumental, and you can never forget that.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of that. Individual concessions for different styles of uh, all sorts of disabilities or challenges that our physicians or team have, and trying to get a system to one, understand it, two, say yes to the requirements. Like we see a lot of people just really up against the system and not feeling like they're being heard or being able to get a yes. We can absolutely help you with that as they navigate through these systems.
Absolutely. And let me say this, if anybody from my system ends up listening to this podcast, it's not personal against anybody. It's really not. This is the way these organizations and enterprises and systems have to operate. So we just have to learn how to, as physicians, I will always say we have to stick together no matter what and remember who we are and who each other are, because we do have to look after each other and our profession.
Hmm. Um, Tell me about the I've just, where was I going with this question? Oh, never mind. It's okay.
Okay.
It's gone.
Okay.
Into the
Okay.
nether. Never mind.
No
Fine.
problem. No problem. If you find
All
it, let
right.
me know.
Where do people find you if they're looking to connect?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. My name Dhaval Desai on LinkedIn. I'm also heavily on Instagram at Dr. Desai MD. That's DoctorDesaimD. And I also have a website. Pretty easy to Google and find me around there. I'd love to connect. The conversations and the platform that you have is such an important and pivotal one for physicians, especially mid-career physicians who feel, we use the word trapped. So I appreciate you and value what you're doing right
Yeah, that was my other question. Executive coach. You had one after your burnout, after you'd had a rejection by the system, then you used one. We hear of engineers in their first job getting an executive coach right off the bat. Do you think that as you moved into leadership within the system, that an executive coach would have added anything to that
now.
um,
I
role?
think certainly. I think yes. The answer is yes, yes, yes. They would have added me in terms of coaching, what I can do, how I can think about a 5-year plan, 7-year plan, get me more grounded, and probably help me figure out where I'm going, what I'm doing next. Now, they argue that you should get a mentor and that they do the same thing. But when you have somebody mentoring you within the same organization, it's not the same coaching. It's different. And
Mhm.
I'm convinced you need somebody independent of who your employer is, because there's just ends up being some type of intrinsic bias that comes along with that.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. Is there anything we didn't talk about we should talk about before we wrap up?
Um, mental health is health, and physicians, we often feel that we are immune to it, and we choose not to do anything about it because we feel we will be either A, stigmatized from our patients, our family members, loved ones, or we feel we'll lose our ability to practice if we seek mental health. It'll get documented in the chart. I'm here to tell you all that is changing and has changed in most places. You are stronger and better if you get that help. And if you think something's not right, talk to somebody. There's many, many resources out there. The Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation, where I'm an ambassador, has the All In for Mental Health campaign. There's links to all of that in my information too, that I shared. But it's such an important thing to happen because, frankly, 400 physicians a year should not pass from suicide in this country. It's appalling. It's appalling. So that's what I'd like to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for what you do and for helping with your book sales, even going towards that. That's excellent.
Yes. Yes.
Um, COVID Frontlines, Burning Out on the COVID Frontlines. That was your book, correct?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. Available on all major book platforms.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for this
Thank
call.
you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, and have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Hey, if you found this podcast episode helpful, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. Every time you do, you help a colleague or friend find our podcast, and it can help them too. Don't forget to share it along with your friends. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget we have Charting Champions for physicians and Smarter Charting for nurse practitioners and other clinicians to help you get home with your work done. We are helping you create sustainable clinical medicine. Thanks for listening.